Every year, usually during our graduation ceremonies, UBC has the honor of bestowing honorary degrees upon individuals who, in the opinion of the university community, have fit the criteria of excellence and eminence in their chosen field. Tracy Porteous exemplifies these characteristics, and it is our pleasure to grant her an honorary degree. For close to 40 years, Tracy Porteous has been one of Canada's most active and influential leaders in the movement to end gender-based violence. She has worked tirelessly to form groundbreaking not-for-profit societies and build strategic alliances with traditional and non-traditional partners to effect important changes in policy, funding, and legislation. In British Columbia, she is best known as the founding executive director of the Ending Violence Association of BC, a provincial association supporting over 300 programs and initiatives that respond to sexual and domestic violence, child abuse, and criminal harassment. She's also the founding co-chair of the Ending Violence Association of Canada, a national organization whose main purpose is to educate and respond to gender-based violence at the national level, including working with educational institutions and key organizations to ensure cross-sectoral collaboration. In 2015, she began work to develop a national policy on gender-based violence for the Canadian Football League, and has since worked on its implementation by overseeing training to every CFL player, coach, and staff member. She continues to provide advice and analysis to all levels of government in BC and other regions of Canada, and has been called upon to meet with anti-violence delegations of governments across the world, highlighted by her participation as a delegate and speaker at the United Nations 57th Commission on the Status of Women. Her numerous awards include 2 Governor General of Canada medals in 1992 and 2014, and the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2013. In recognition of an extraordinary career in a critically important sector of community service, we are pleased to confer the degree Doctor of Laws honoris causa upon Tracy Ann Porteous. It now gives me great pleasure to ask Dr. Porteous to say a few words.
Mr. Chancellor, Mr. President, and members of the broadly diverse UBC community, I am profoundly honored to join you today from my home on the unceded territory of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Squamish, and the Musqueam peoples. For 50 years, feminists have been raising awareness and working to prevent and respond sexual assault, domestic violence, child abuse, and sexual and criminal harassment to anyone who would listen. I am immensely proud to have spent the last 4 decades of my life being part of this vibrant movement to end this senseless violence and to increase dignity. A movement that began with marches and letters, thousands of letters demanding to be heard, written in those days by a legion of volunteers across our nation who spent our evenings and weekends accompanying raped and beaten survivors of unspeakable violence to hospitals and police. A movement of feminists pulling all-nighters, brainstorming and writing proposals for funding, for services, for social policy changes, who spent our weekdays working on law reform, writing papers analyzing the benefits or downfalls of various policy and legislation, piloting demonstration projects, and documenting the results to help us make the case for future funding, crafting curriculum and booklets and campaigns focused on prevention. We have shared our analysis, many of us as survivors, and our skills as advocates and therapists and academics through training police and Crown, healthcare staff, child protection social workers on what it means to be survivor-centered and how to do no harm. We pushed for and achieved many social policy and legal reforms, too many to mention really, but to name a few: criminal code reform related to increasing survivor privacy protection. We clarified the law on sexual consent. We can now impose reverse onus at bail in cases of intimate partner violence. We modernized the sentencing provisions which treat abuse against spouse or a common law as an aggravating factor Strangulation, choking, and suffocation are now considered in law as elevated forms of assault. We have legislation providing paid leave from work for survivors of sexual or domestic violence. We now have legislatively sanctioned provisions allowing leases to be broken if safety from sexual or domestic violence is at issue. We have built best practices and training for more informed police response to domestic violence and created evidence-based risk factors that help us all assist survivors facing lethal violence. And most importantly, we have created sophisticated life-saving support and advocacy services for survivors suffering the aftermath of violence. Great thanks are owed to thousands of women, and some men too, who for over 4 decades have been almost singularly concerned with the all too stark, often lethal epidemic of men's violence against women. We still have work ahead, as the list I just mentioned, the one outlining how this movement began, the all-nighters, the hospital and police accompaniments, the proposals and pilot projects, the letters, well, that work still carries on to this day. There is a perilous need to put in place increased financial resources to support violence response and prevention efforts and to build social policy that leaves no one behind. We must do better as a society by taking concrete steps to ensure there are gender-based violence-related services for Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit survivors. We must put in place public policy related to sexual assault and related training for responders and funding for services, as you'd be surprised how much more there's still to be done on this front. We must decriminalize sex work and support respect and visibility for racialized, trans, non-binary, and people living with disabilities in all aspects of public life. And we must, at once, without delay, encourage all Canadians to speak up about violence and disrespect in all of its forms, whether the weapon is acting out racism or sexism and misogyny or ableism. The antidote is our voice. Speaking up is our superpower, and not staying silent will indeed change the world. But for today, I want to step off my well-worn soapbox and take this opportunity to speak to how deeply and profoundly grateful I am to having spent my entire adult life working in a field and being part of building a community of informed, compassionate, and skilled responders. I hope this doesn't come across as morbid, but there have been many days where I have gone home after a long day at work and said to myself, if I died today, that would be okay. Because I had the opportunity to help somebody who was struggling or to change something in this life. I have been privileged to work with hundreds of cabinet ministers at every level of government, Indigenous leaders, women and men, chiefs and council, immigrant women leaders, policymakers, academics, police chiefs, prosecutors, coroners, legal analysts, judges, sex workers, and community advocates, and more. Together, we have been busy creating policy and programs to keep women and girls, queer and gender non-binary people, and male survivors safer. In 2012, I was invited to speak to the United Nations 57th Commission on the Status of Women in New York. This global session marked the first time the Commission solely focused on violence against women. That was a highlight for sure, as it was to speak at Rideau Hall in Ottawa when I was presented with the Persons Case Medal in 2014 for my work related to the equality of women in Canada. And right up there was receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award from one of Canada's most preeminent legal minds, BC's previous child and youth advocate, Mary Ellen Pelafond, now of the UBC community. I must say, now being honored in this way by yourself, President Ono, is really mind-blowing to me. Meeting and befriending local, national, and international leaders has been and continues to be a salve in a way. As for many years in this work, few seemed to pay attention or care about what was really an epidemic hiding in plain sight. I believe my work, and by extension, the work of my many colleagues and coworkers, has been recognized in part because violence in all of its forms is at the heart of society's pain. Most people don't know how to talk about things that are unfathomable. It is painful and frightening and makes most people uneasy, and so therefore violence has thrived in the silence of most. Some of us have cracked the code though, have figured out ways to have these conversations and to have these conversations in ways that undo the humiliation that was first perpetrated and replace the fear and silence with the power of voice and with that voice, the courage to act, and be that for survivors or policymakers. 10 years ago, I approached the BC Lions Football Club to ask them if they would consider a partnership to become spokesmen for a message to men and boys, to use their larger-than-life celebrity role model status to make it cool for other men and boys to respect women and to encourage males in society instead of staying silent in the face of seeing and hearing disrespectful attitudes and behaviors, to ask men to speak up. You see, the vast majority of men do not commit violence. It's a minority of men who do this on a repetitive basis throughout their offending career. But the silence of the majority has something to do with the state that we're in. And so the more people we can get to speak up, the better. Our message, speak up and break the silence, has been viewed well into the billions, and we've trained over 200,000 youth and community members in person. Since we began with the Lions, I've had the privilege of working with a great number of other male-dominated industries towards the same end. The CFL itself, with the total support from the Commissioner. Canadian military working to end sexual misconduct in their midst. The United Steelworkers, the BC Federation of Labor's construction trades, and many others. This work really feels like another wave of the women's movement, men speaking to other men. Maybe it's Women's Movement 3.0. But more than anything, I want to say this to the emerging leaders of UBC. I've found a way to do my work with love and to treat each and every person I have worked with the utmost of respect and empathy. That goes, of course, for the privileged times I've had sharing sacred space and time with family members whose mother or sister or daughter or cousin was senselessly murdered, or when standing witness to the healing process for many survivors and their family members supporting them. Or that goes too to working shoulder to shoulder with police and policymakers, developing policy and figuring out funding processes to make a difference. Leading with love and compassion, empathy and understanding, to me, is the only way to work. I wish to give a deep shout out to the love of my life, Dr. Becky Ross of UBC. In so many ways, over the 22 years that we've been together, she has held me up, listening to my many, and I can say many, machinations of what still needed to be done. She took care of me. She takes care of our little dog on my many trips across the country and beyond. And so to Becky, deeply, thank you. I love you. And thank you again to President Ono, Dean Frank, and everyone else at UBC who are part of making this amazing honor happen. Thank you deeply.